Maria Elena Vasquez had always known that working as a translator at the military base carried risks. She spoke 5 languages fluently and had clearance to access classified documents that most people would never see. At 28, she was one of the youngest civilians with such high security access at Fort Meridian, a sprawling complex hidden deep in the Nevada desert. The morning started like any other. Maria arrived at her small office in Building C at exactly 7:30, carrying her usual black coffee and a folder of documents that needed translation from Russian to English. The papers seemed routine at first glance. Supply requests, personnel transfers, maintenance schedules. Nothing that would suggest the day would end with her fighting for her life. She had been working for 3 hours when she noticed something strange in one of the documents. It was buried in what appeared to be a simple inventory list, but Maria's trained eye caught the discrepancy. The numbers didn't match. Equipment that was supposed to be decommissioned was still being listed as active. More troubling, the dates showed that weapons marked as destroyed were actually being moved to different locations. Maria felt her heart rate increase as she read through the document again. This wasn't a simple clerical error. Someone was deliberately falsifying records about military weapons. She knew she had stumbled onto something that could be dangerous, but her duty as a translator meant she had to report what she found. She made copies of the suspicious documents and locked them in her desk drawer. Then she walked down the long corridor to Colonel Harrison's office. The colonel was a stern man in his 50s who had always treated Maria with professional respect. She knocked on his door and was told to enter. Colonel Harrison looked up from his computer screen as Maria approached his desk. She explained what she had discovered in the Russian documents, showing him the original papers and pointing out the inconsistencies. The colonel's expression grew darker as she spoke. "Are you certain about these translations?" he asked, studying the documents carefully. "Yes, sir. I've double-checked everything. The equipment listed as destroyed is actually being transferred to unauthorized locations. Someone is covering up the movement of military weapons." Colonel Harrison was quiet for a long moment, then he picked up his phone and made a call. Maria couldn't hear what he was saying, but she noticed his voice was urgent and low. When he hung up, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Maria, I need you to gather all related documents and bring them to Conference Room 7 immediately. We're going to need a full briefing on this matter." She nodded and returned to her office to collect everything. As she walked back through the corridors, she noticed more soldiers than usual were stationed at various checkpoints. Something felt different about the atmosphere in the building, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Conference Room 7 was in the basement level of Building C. Maria had been there only once before, during her initial security briefing when she started working at the base. It was a windowless room with thick concrete walls, designed for discussing sensitive matters. When she arrived at the conference room, Colonel Harrison was already there with 2 other officers she didn't recognize. They were both wearing general's insignia, which surprised her. It was unusual for such high-ranking officials to be involved in what she had assumed was a routine irregularity. "Please have a seat." "Ms. Vasquez," Colonel Harrison said, gesturing to a chair across from the 3 military officers. Maria sat down and placed the documents on the table. One of the generals, a tall man with gray hair and cold blue eyes, leaned forward and began asking her detailed questions about the translations. He wanted to know exactly when she had discovered the discrepancies, who else she had spoken to about them, and whether she had made any additional copies. "I made copies for my own records, as required by protocol," Maria answered honestly. "They're locked in my desk drawer." The second general, shorter and stockier than the first, exchanged a meaningful look with his colleague. "Ms. Vasquez, what you've discovered is part of an ongoing classified investigation. For national security reasons, we need to ensure that information about this matter doesn't leave this room." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. Something about the way the general spoke made her uncomfortable. "Of course, sir. I understand the importance of maintaining security. We're going to need you to retrieve those copies from your desk and bring them here," the first general said. "All copies. We need to secure all evidence related to this matter immediately." Maria stood up, but as she moved toward the door, Colonel Harrison stepped in front of her. "Actually, Ms. Vasquez, we'll have someone retrieve those documents for you. There's been a change in security protocols and civilians are not permitted to move freely through the building at this time." Now Maria was genuinely alarmed. The colonel's behavior was completely out of character, and the presence of the two generals for what should have been a routine matter made no sense. She realized that the documents she had translated might have revealed something much more significant than simple equipment fraud. "Is there a problem, sir?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "No problem at all," the first general replied, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "We simply need to ensure that proper procedures are followed. This is a matter of national security now." Maria's training had taught her to recognize when a situation was becoming dangerous. Every instinct she had was telling her that these three officers were not planning to handle this matter through proper channels. The way they were looking at her, the sudden change in security protocols, the fact that no other personnel were present for what should have been a routine briefing, everything suggested that she had uncovered something they wanted to keep hidden. She took a step toward the door, but the second general moved to block her path. "We're not quite finished here, Ms. Vasquez. Please sit back down." Maria's mouth went dry as she realized that she might not be leaving this room as easily as she had entered it. The documents she had translated weren't evidence of simple fraud. They were proof of something much worse, and the three men in this room were involved in covering it up. She was no longer just a translator who had found an irregularity in some paperwork. She had become a threat to whatever operation these officers were running, and she was beginning to understand that they might do anything to protect their secret. The tension in Conference Room 7 became suffocating as Maria realized she was trapped. The three military officers were no longer pretending this was a routine security matter. Their faces had hardened and their body language made it clear that they saw her as a problem that needed to be solved. "Sit down, Ms. Vasquez," the tall general repeated, his voice carrying a threat that hadn't been there before. Maria remained standing, her mind racing through possible escape routes. The conference room had only one door, and all three men were between her and it. The walls were concrete and there were no windows. She was completely isolated in the basement of a military facility, where no one would hear her if she screamed. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "I'm just a translator. I was doing my job when I found those discrepancies. If this is classified, I can sign whatever papers you need me to sign to keep it confidential." The shorter general laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Ms. Vasquez, you've seen documents that prove we've been moving weapons to buyers who aren't supposed to have them. You've uncovered an operation that's been running for 2 years and involves millions of dollars. Do you really think we're going to let you walk out of here with that knowledge?" Maria's blood ran cold. These weren't loyal American military officers. They were criminals using their positions to sell weapons illegally. The documents she had translated weren't evidence of simple fraud or bureaucratic mistakes. They were proof of treason. "Colonel Harrison," she said, turning to the man she had trusted and respected for 2 years. "You can't be part of this. This is selling weapons to enemies of the United States. People could die because of what you're doing." Colonel Harrison wouldn't meet her eyes. "You don't understand the bigger picture, Maria. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good. The government doesn't always make the right choices about who our allies should be. So you decided to make those choices yourself?" Maria's voice was rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "You're selling American weapons to terrorists, aren't you? That's what those transfer locations really are." The tall general stepped closer to her. "Ms. Vasquez, you're going to forget everything you saw in those documents. You're going to turn over all copies and you're going to continue doing your job as if nothing happened. In return, you'll continue to receive your salary and benefits and you'll stay alive." Maria backed away until she felt the cold concrete wall against her spine. "And if I refuse? Then you'll have an unfortunate accident," the shorter general said matter-of-factly. "Military bases can be dangerous places. People fall downstairs, get caught in machinery accidents, have heart attacks from stress. All sorts of tragic things can happen." She realized that these men had probably killed before to protect their operation. They had too much at stake to let one translator destroy everything they had built. The weapons they were selling were probably being used to kill innocent people around the world, and they didn't care as long as they were getting paid. "How many people know about this?" she asked, stalling for time while she tried to think of a way out. "Enough to make it work, but not so many that we can't control the situation," Colonel Harrison answered. "The people who need to know are loyal to us. The people who don't need to know never find out. Like me," Maria said. "Like you," the tall general confirmed. "Except you found out by accident, which puts us in a difficult position." Maria knew she had only one chance. If she agreed to their demands now, they would never trust her completely. They would always see her as a threat, and eventually they would decide she was too dangerous to keep alive. Her only hope was to get out of this room and find someone who could help her expose what was happening. "I need time to think about this," she said. "This is a big decision. You're asking me to become part of a criminal conspiracy." "You're already part of it," the shorter general replied. "The moment you saw those documents, you became involved. The only question now is whether you're going to be a willing participant or a problem that needs to be eliminated." Maria took a deep breath and made her decision. "Okay, I'll cooperate, but I need to see exactly what I'm getting involved in. If I'm going to keep quiet about this, I need to understand the full scope of what you're doing." The three men exchanged glances. Colonel Harrison looked relieved, but the two generals still seemed suspicious. "What do you want to know?" the tall general asked cautiously. "I want to see the complete operation. The real transfer schedules, the buyers, the money flow. If I'm going to be complicit in this, I need to know what I'm protecting." It was a risky gambit, but Maria hoped that their greed would overcome their caution. If she could convince them that she was willing to join their conspiracy, they might give her access to information that could be used to expose them. The shorter general shook his head. "That's not how this works. You don't get to make demands. You keep quiet, you do your job, and you stay alive. That's the deal." "But how do I know you won't kill me anyway?" Maria pressed. "If this operation is as big as you say it is, what's to stop you from deciding I'm too much of a risk 6 months from now?" "Because you'll be useful," Colonel Harrison said. "We need translators who can be trusted. There are always new documents that need to be processed, new contacts in different countries. If you prove your loyalty, you could become a valuable asset." Maria pretended to consider this offer while her mind worked frantically to find an escape plan. She noticed that the shorter general kept checking his watch, which suggested they were on some kind of schedule. Maybe other people were expecting them somewhere, which might limit how long they could keep her in this room. "I'll need guarantees," she said. "Some kind of insurance that you won't just kill me once I've served your purposes." The tall general's patience was clearly running out. "Ms. Vasquez, you're in no position to negotiate. You have two choices. Join us willingly and live, or refuse and die. There are no other options." Maria realized that her stalling tactics weren't working. These men had probably been through this process before with other people who had discovered their operation. They knew exactly how to handle someone in her position, and they weren't going to give her any real opportunities to escape. She was going to have to create her own opportunity, even if it meant taking a desperate risk. The alternative was to become complicit in selling weapons to terrorists or to be murdered by the very people she had trusted to protect American interests. The time for negotiation was over. If she was going to survive this, she would have to fight. Maria's heart pounded as she realized her situation was becoming more desperate by the minute. The three officers were growing impatient, and she could see in their eyes that they were preparing to end this conversation one way or another. She had to act now or she would never get another chance. "All right," she said, raising her hands in apparent surrender. "I understand what you're saying. I don't want to die, and I don't want to spend my life looking over my shoulder. But I need you to understand something too." The tall general raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I'm not stupid," Maria continued, taking a small step away from the wall. "I know that even if I agree to help you, you'll never completely trust me. You'll always wonder if I might change my mind and go to the authorities. So before I commit to this, I need to know that I'm truly protected." Colonel Harrison leaned forward. "What kind of protection are you talking about?" "I want to record a confession," Maria said, the words tumbling out as she improvised desperately. "I want to admit on tape that I've been helping with this operation from the beginning. That way, if I ever try to expose you, I'll be exposing myself as well. You'll have evidence that I was a willing participant." The shorter general looked intrigued despite himself. "That's actually not a bad idea. Insurance that goes both ways." "Exactly," Maria said, taking another small step toward the center of the room. "I record a statement saying I've been translating documents for your operation for months, maybe even helping you identify which weapons would be easiest to move without detection. If anyone investigates, they'll find evidence that I was part of the conspiracy from the start." The tall general was nodding slowly. "It would certainly make it difficult for you to turn on us later." Maria could see that her desperate plan was working. The idea of having evidence that would destroy her credibility as a witness was appealing to them. What they didn't realize was that she was trying to buy herself time and possibly get them to reveal more information about their operation that could be used against them later. But I want something in return, she continued. I want to know exactly how much money we're talking about here. If I'm going to risk everything, I want to know what my share will be. Colonel Harrison smiled for the first time since the interrogation began. Now you're thinking like a businesswoman. The operation generates about $3 million per year. Your cut would be $50,000 plus your regular salary. $3 million? Maria tried to sound impressed rather than horrified. How many weapons are you moving to generate that kind of money? Enough, the shorter general said. Small arms, ammunition, some larger equipment. Nothing that the military won't write off as routine losses or transfers to Allied forces. Maria realized that this operation was even larger than she had initially thought. They weren't just stealing a few weapons here and there. They were systematically looting military supplies and selling them to the highest bidder, regardless of who those bidders might be. Who are the buyers? She asked. If I'm going to be part of this, I need to know who we're dealing with. The tall general's expression hardened. That's need-to-know information, and you don't need to know. Your job is translation, not sales. Maria could see that she had pushed as far as she could without arousing suspicion. She needed to make her move before they decided she was asking too many questions. Okay, she said. Let's make that recording then. But I want to do it properly, with a camera, not just audio. That way there's no question about my identity or my voluntary participation. We don't have recording equipment here, Colonel Harrison said. My phone has a video camera, Maria offered. We could use that. She reached slowly into her pocket, praying that they wouldn't stop her. Her phone was her only potential weapon and her only hope of getting help. If she could somehow get a message out or activate an emergency signal, she might have a chance. The shorter general held up his hand. Hold on, let me see that phone first. Maria's heart sank, but she handed over her phone. The general examined it carefully, checking for any active applications or recent calls. After a moment, he handed it back to her. Go ahead and start recording, he said. But remember, we'll be watching everything you do. Maria activated the video camera function on her phone, her mind racing. She had to find a way to use this opportunity to her advantage. As she held up the phone to begin recording, she made a decision that would either save her life or get her killed immediately. Instead of pointing the camera at herself, she quickly spun around and pointed it at the three officers. Actually, she said loudly, I think people need to know what Colonel Harrison, General Morrison, and General Blackwood are really doing with American military weapons. The effect was immediate and explosive. All three men lunged toward her at once, but Maria was already moving. She dodged to the side and threw her phone as hard as she could toward the door, hoping it might somehow get through or at least continue recording the confrontation. The tall general, who she now knew was General Morrison, caught her arm and twisted it painfully behind her back. You stupid girl. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I know exactly what I've done, Maria gasped, struggling against his grip. I've recorded proof that high-ranking military officers are selling weapons to enemies of the United States. Even if you kill me now, that evidence exists. Colonel Harrison picked up her phone from where it had landed near the door. The recording stopped when you threw it. There's nothing here that could hurt us. But Maria smiled despite her pain. Check the cloud storage, Colonel. My phone automatically uploads videos to my personal account. Even if you destroy the phone, the recording is already backing up to servers that you can't access. The three men exchanged panicked glances. General Blackwood, the shorter general, grabbed Maria's other arm. How do we access your cloud account? What's the password? Do you really think I'm going to tell you that? Maria replied. You're going to kill me anyway. At least this way your crimes will be exposed. General Morrison's face was red with rage. We can make you tell us. There are ways to make people talk. Go ahead and try, Maria said, surprised by her own courage. Torture a civilian on an American military base. Add that to your list of crimes. I'm sure that will help your case when this all comes out. She could see that her defiance was driving them to desperation. They had gone from being in complete control of the situation to realizing that their entire operation might be exposed. Desperate people made poor decisions, and she was hoping they would make a mistake that would give her an opportunity to escape. Colonel Harrison was frantically working with her phone, trying to access her cloud account. The backup is still in progress, he said. If we can stop it now, we might be able to contain this. Even if you stop the backup, I sent emails about this before I came to your office. Maria lied smoothly. I may be just a translator, but I'm not stupid. I documented everything I found and sent copies to people outside the base. It was a complete lie, but she could see that it was having the desired effect. All 3 officers were now in full panic mode, and panicked people made mistakes. The panic in the room was palpable as the 3 officers realized their carefully constructed operation was falling apart. Maria could feel their grip on her arms tightening as their desperation grew, but she also sensed that their fear was making them sloppy. Who did you send the emails to? General Blackwood demanded, his voice cracking with stress. Maria knew she had to keep them believing her lie while looking for any opportunity to escape. My sister works for the FBI, she said, which was actually true. I also sent copies to a journalist friend who specializes in military corruption stories. Colonel Harrison slammed her phone down on the conference table. The cloud backup completed. The video is already uploaded. General Morrison loosened his grip slightly as he processed this information. How long was the recording? What exactly did it capture? Long enough, Maria said. Your names, your ranks, your admission about the $3 million in weapon sales. More than enough to start an investigation. The 3 men released her arms and stepped back, frantically discussing their options in hushed tones. Maria could hear fragments of their conversation. Something about damage control, about eliminating evidence, about people who needed to be warned. While they were distracted, Maria slowly moved toward the door. She was only a few feet away when General Morrison noticed her movement. Don't even think about it, he snarled, blocking her path again. You're not leaving this room until we figure out how to fix this mess. You can't fix it, Maria replied. Too many people already know. Your only option now is to surrender and cooperate with the investigation. Maybe you can get reduced sentences if you help prosecute the buyers. General Blackwood laughed bitterly. Reduced sentences? Do you know what they do to military officers who commit treason? We're not going to prison, Ms. Vasquez. We're going to disappear, and so are you. Maria felt a chill as she realized they were talking about fleeing the country. If they ran, they would have to kill her to prevent her from providing testimony about their crimes. Her only hope was to escape before they could organize their departure. The base is already under investigation. She lied again. Federal agents are probably on their way here right now. If you run, you'll just confirm your guilt. Colonel Harrison was pacing back and forth, his military composure completely shattered. This is impossible. We've been so careful. How did one translator destroy everything? You got greedy, Maria answered. You started moving too many weapons, falsifying too many records. Eventually, someone was going to notice the discrepancies. The truth was that she had only discovered their operation by accident, but she wanted them to believe that the investigation was more advanced than it actually was. If they thought federal agents were already closing in, they might panic and make the kind of mistakes that would give her a chance to escape. General Morrison pulled out his cell phone and began making calls. Maria could hear him speaking urgently to someone about implementing emergency protocols and securing assets. It sounded like they had planned for this possibility and had escape routes already in place. How long do we have? General Blackwood asked after Morrison finished his call. 12 hours, maybe less, Morrison replied. We need to move fast. Maria realized that they were about to initiate some kind of evacuation plan. If they succeeded in fleeing the base, they would almost certainly kill her before they left. She had to find a way to escape in the next few minutes or she would never get another chance. You know this won't work, she said, trying to keep them talking while she looked for any advantage. You can't just disappear 3 high-ranking officers without people asking questions. The FBI will track you down eventually. Not if we're in a country that doesn't extradite to the United States, General Morrison replied. We've been preparing for this possibility since we started the operation. Colonel Harrison had stopped pacing and was staring at Maria with an expression that made her blood run cold. The question is what to do with you. We can't take you with us and we can't leave you here to testify. You could let me go, Maria suggested desperately. I could disappear too. Leave the country, change my identity. I have no loyalty to the government that pays me barely enough to live on. General Blackwood shook his head. Too risky. You know too much and we have no way to control you once you're free. Maria could see that they had already decided to kill her. The only question was when and how. She had to act now, before they could organize themselves enough to carry out their plan. At least let me call my sister and tell her I'm okay, she said. She'll worry if she doesn't hear from me, and that will just bring more attention to my disappearance. Absolutely not, General Morrison replied. You're not contacting anyone. But as he spoke, Maria noticed that he had set his own phone down on the conference table while he talked to his colleagues. If she could reach it, she might be able to call for help or at least alert someone to her location. She pretended to stumble slightly, catching herself against the table and palming Morrison's phone in the same motion. The device was unlocked, and she quickly pressed the emergency call button while sliding it into her pocket. I need to use the bathroom, she said, hoping to buy more time for the emergency call to connect. You can wait, Colonel Harrison replied. We'll be finishing this conversation soon. Maria's heart was racing as she felt the phone in her pocket. She didn't know if the emergency call had gone through, but it was her only hope. Even if the operators couldn't hear her clearly, they would be able to trace the location of the call to the military base. General Morrison suddenly patted his pockets, looking confused. Where's my phone? Maria tried to look innocent, but she could tell from Morrison's expression that he suspected her. She had to create a distraction before he could search her and find the phone. Before you kill me, she said loudly, hoping the emergency operators could hear her, I want you to know that I've hidden additional evidence in my apartment. Documents that prove Colonel Harrison, General Morrison, and General Blackwood have been selling military weapons to terrorists. All three men moved toward her at once, but Maria was ready. She dodged around the conference table, keeping it between herself and her captors while continuing to speak loudly for the benefit of anyone who might be listening to Morrison's phone. The evidence is hidden in apartment 3B at 1247. Desert View Drive, she shouted. If anything happens to me, my sister, Agent Sarah Vasquez of the FBI, will know where to look. General Morrison tackled her from behind, sending them both crashing to the floor. As they struggled, Maria felt the phone slip from her pocket and slide across the concrete floor. Morrison grabbed it and saw that it was connected to an emergency call. You clever little witch, he snarled, ending the call. How long was that connected? Maria smiled despite her pain. Long enough. The three officers exchanged panicked glances. They all knew that emergency calls to 911 from military bases were automatically routed to both civilian authorities and military police. Even if Maria's call had lasted only a few seconds, it would trigger an investigation into why a general's phone had been used to place an emergency call from the basement of a classified facility. We have to leave now, General Blackwood said urgently. Security will be here within minutes to investigate that call. But Colonel Harrison was staring at Maria with murderous rage. Not without finishing this. She's destroyed everything. She deserves to pay for what she's done. Maria knew that she had only seconds before Harrison's anger overcame his survival instinct. If he decided to kill her before they fled, there would be nothing she could do to stop him. The emergency call might bring help eventually, but it wouldn't save her from immediate death at the hands of three desperate traitors. Colonel Harrison's face was twisted with rage as he advanced toward Maria, who was still on the floor where General Morrison had tackled her. She could see in his eyes that he had moved beyond rational thought and was about to do something that would eliminate any chance of their escape going unnoticed. Harrison, don't be stupid, General Morrison snapped, grabbing the colonel's arm. We don't have time for this. Security is probably already on their way down here. But Harrison shook off Morrison's grip. She's ruined everything. 2 years of planning, millions of dollars, our entire future, all destroyed by one nosy translator. I'm not letting her live to testify about what we've done. Maria scrambled backward across the concrete floor, trying to put distance between herself and the enraged colonel. She could hear footsteps and voices in the corridor outside the conference room, which meant that security personnel were indeed responding to the emergency call. But would they arrive in time to save her? If you kill me now, you'll never make it out of the base, she said, hoping to appeal to their self-preservation instincts. Murder will bring federal investigators, forensic teams, full lockdown procedures. Your escape plan won't work if this place becomes a crime scene. General Blackwood was nervously checking his watch. She's right, Harrison. We stick to the plan. We say there was a misunderstanding, that she accidentally triggered an emergency call while we were briefing her about security protocols. Then we implement the evacuation procedures we've prepared. And what happens when she tells investigators about the weapons transfers? Harrison demanded. What happens when they search her apartment and find whatever evidence she's hidden there? Maria realized that her lie about hiding evidence in her apartment was now working against her. Harrison believed that even if they escaped, she would still be able to destroy them from prison through her testimony and hidden documents. The voices in the corridor were getting closer. Maria could make out at least 3 different people, and they seemed to be systematically checking rooms. She estimated that they would reach conference room 7 within the next minute or two. General Morrison was studying the room's layout, probably calculating whether they could eliminate Maria and dispose of evidence before security arrived. "There's another way," he said quietly. "We make it look like an accident." She fell down the stairs trying to escape during the emergency response. Tragic accident, no murder investigation. Maria's blood ran cold as she realized what they were planning. The stairwell outside the conference room was concrete with metal railings. A fall down those stairs could easily be fatal, and it would be difficult for investigators to prove that it wasn't accidental. "That could work," Colonel Harrison said, his rage giving way to cold calculation. During the confusion of the emergency response, she tried to evacuate, but fell down the stairs in her panic. "We were still in the conference room when it happened." General Blackwood nodded. "No evidence of foul play, no murder investigation, and we proceed with our evacuation as planned. The emergency call becomes part of the cover story. She was trying to call for help because she was confused about the evacuation procedures." Maria knew she had to act immediately. In seconds, they would grab her and force her toward the stairwell. Once they got her out of the conference room, she would have no chance of survival. Her only hope was to make enough noise to attract the attention of the security personnel in the corridor. "Help!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. "Help me! They're trying to kill me!" Colonel Harrison lunged toward her, trying to cover her mouth, but Maria rolled away and continued shouting. "I'm in conference room 7. Colonel Harrison is trying to murder me." The voices in the corridor stopped abruptly. Then Maria heard running footsteps approaching their location. General Morrison cursed and moved toward the door, probably planning to intercept the security personnel and convince them that nothing was wrong. "Security team responding to emergency call," a voice called from just outside the room. "Please identify yourselves and state your condition." General Morrison opened the door, putting on his most authoritative military bearing. "Everything is under control here, Sergeant. We were conducting a classified briefing when Ms. Vasquez accidentally triggered an emergency call on my phone. There's no actual emergency." Maria could see the security sergeant through the open door. He was a young man who looked like he was following proper procedures by responding to the emergency call, but he also seemed intimidated by the presence of 3 high-ranking officers. "I need to verify the condition of all personnel in the room," the sergeant said respectfully but firmly. "Standard protocol for emergency calls from classified areas." "Of course," Morrison replied smoothly. "As you can see, we're all fine here." The sergeant stepped into the room and immediately noticed Maria on the floor, disheveled and obviously distressed. "Ma'am, are you injured? Do you need medical assistance?" This was Maria's chance, possibly her only chance to get help. But she also knew that if she accused the 3 officers of attempted murder, it would be her word against theirs, and they might be able to convince the sergeant that she was having some kind of breakdown. "I'm okay," she said carefully, getting to her feet. "But I need to report something very important about these officers. They've been involved in illegal weapons sales." The sergeant's expression changed immediately. Colonel Harrison stepped forward, his face showing concern rather than anger. "Sergeant, Ms. Vasquez has been under a great deal of stress lately. We were actually meeting with her to discuss getting her some psychological counseling. She's been making wild accusations and seems to be having paranoid episodes." Maria felt her heart sink as she realized how easily Harrison was manipulating the situation. To the young sergeant, it would seem much more likely that a stressed civilian employee was having mental health issues than that 3 decorated military officers were committing treason. "That's not true," Maria said desperately. "Check my phone. I recorded them admitting to selling weapons. The video was uploaded to my cloud storage." General Morrison shook his head sadly. "This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior we've been concerned about. She's been claiming that routine military operations are somehow criminal conspiracies." The sergeant looked uncertain. He was clearly out of his depth dealing with accusations of criminal activity involving general officers. "Ma'am, maybe you should come with me so we can sort this out with the appropriate authorities." Maria realized that the sergeant was trying to help her, while avoiding a direct confrontation with the generals. If she went with him, she would at least be safe from immediate harm, and she might be able to convince other security personnel to investigate her claims. "Yes," she said quickly. "I want to make a formal report to security." But as she moved toward the door, Colonel Harrison blocked her path. "Sergeant, I'm afraid that's not possible. Ms. Vasquez has been exposed to classified information during our briefing. She can't leave this area until she's been properly debriefed and cleared by intelligence officers." The sergeant frowned. "Sir, if she's requesting protective custody, I have a duty to ensure her safety." "Her safety isn't in question," General Blackwood interjected. "But national security protocols must be followed. She'll need to remain here until the proper authorities can debrief her about the classified materials she's been exposed to." Maria could see that. The three officers were using security protocols to trap her. They were claiming that she couldn't leave because of classified information, while simultaneously discrediting her accusations as paranoid delusions. "Sergeant," she said urgently, "please check my personnel file. I have top-secret clearance. I've been handling classified materials for 2 years without any problems. The only reason they don't want me to leave is because I've discovered evidence of their crimes." The young sergeant was clearly struggling with the situation. He had been trained to follow orders from superior officers, but he also had a duty to investigate potential crimes and protect civilians. "Sir," he said to General Morrison, "I think this situation needs to be escalated to the base commander. There are serious accusations being made, and I don't have the authority to resolve this on my own." Morrison's expression hardened slightly. "Sergeant, you're dismissing the evaluation of 3 general officers about the mental state of a civilian employee. Are you sure you want to question our judgment?" Maria could see that the sergeant was being intimidated, but she also noticed that he hadn't backed down completely. He seemed to understand that something wasn't right about the situation, even if he couldn't quite identify what it was. "With respect, sir," the sergeant replied, "any allegation of criminal activity has to be investigated according to regulations. I need to contact the military police and have them send investigators to sort this out." General Blackwood stepped closer to the sergeant, using his height and rank to intimidate the younger man. "Sergeant, you're about to make a career-ending mistake. These are wild accusations from an unstable civilian against 3 general officers with decades of loyal service. Think very carefully about what you're doing." The tension in Conference Room 7 reached a breaking point as everyone waited for the military police to arrive. Maria could see that the 3 officers were calculating their options, and none of those options looked good for her survival. Sergeant Williams stood near the door, his hand resting on his sidearm, clearly sensing that the situation was more dangerous than it appeared. General Morrison was the first to break the silence. "Sergeant, I'm ordering you to escort Ms. Vasquez to the psychiatric facility for immediate evaluation. She's clearly having a mental breakdown and needs medical attention." "Sir, with respect, I can't do that until the investigators arrive," Williams replied firmly. "Once they're here, they can determine the appropriate course of action." Colonel Harrison's military composure was beginning to crack again. "Do you understand what you're doing, Sergeant? You're protecting someone who's making false accusations against general officers. This will destroy your career." But before Williams could respond, Maria heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Multiple sets of boots were approaching rapidly, suggesting that the military police investigators were arriving with backup personnel. "That's them," Williams said, looking relieved. General Blackwood moved closer to Maria, and she could see desperation in his eyes. "Last chance, Ms. Vasquez. Tell them you made a mistake, that you misunderstood what you saw in those documents. We can still work this out." "No," Maria replied quietly. "Too many people have probably died because of the weapons you've sold. I won't be part of covering that up." The door opened and 3 military police investigators entered the room, led by a captain with investigator badges on his uniform. Behind them were 2 additional security personnel, making it clear that they were taking the situation seriously. "I'm Captain Rodriguez, Military Police Investigations," the lead investigator announced. "I understand there are allegations of criminal activity that need to be investigated." Sergeant Williams quickly briefed Captain Rodriguez on the situation, explaining that Maria had made accusations against the 3 officers and that she claimed to have evidence of illegal weapons sales. Captain Rodriguez studied the room and the people in it, his experienced eyes taking in details that the younger sergeant might have missed. "Ma'am," he said to Maria, I need you to tell me exactly what you discovered and what evidence you have." Maria took a deep breath and began explaining everything from the beginning. She described finding the discrepancies in the Russian documents, reporting them to Colonel Harrison, being brought to the conference room, and the 3 officers' admission about their weapons trafficking operation. "The most important evidence is a video recording I made," she continued. "It captured them admitting to the operation and mentioning specific dollar amounts. The video is uploaded to my cloud storage account." Captain Rodriguez turned to the 3 officers. "Gentlemen, I need to hear your version of these events." General Morrison stepped forward, his voice calm and authoritative. "Captain, Ms. Vasquez has been under extreme stress lately. We called this meeting to discuss getting her psychological help. She's been making increasingly paranoid accusations about routine military operations. The documents, she claims, prove criminal activity or simply standard transfer authorizations that she..." "Misunderstood," Colonel Harrison added. "We were trying to explain the proper procedures to her when she became agitated and started making wild accusations." General Blackwood nodded in agreement. "We're concerned about her mental health. She genuinely seems to believe that normal military operations are somehow criminal conspiracies." Captain Rodriguez listened to both sides without showing any emotion. Then he turned back to Maria. "You mentioned video evidence. Can you show me this recording?" Maria realized this was the crucial moment. If the video didn't clearly show what she claimed it showed, or if the 3 officers could explain it away as a misunderstanding, the investigation would end and she would be labeled as mentally unstable. "It's on my phone," she said, "but General Morrison took it from me during the confrontation." Rodriguez looked at Morrison. "Sir, may I see the phone in question?" Morrison handed over Maria's phone reluctantly. "You'll find that any recording she made doesn't support her accusations. She recorded us trying to calm her down and explain proper procedures." Captain Rodriguez examined the phone and found the video file. As he watched it, his expression remained neutral, but Maria noticed that he watched it twice before looking up. "Sir," he said to General Morrison, "this recording shows you discussing a $3 million operation involving weapon transfers to unauthorized buyers. Can you explain what operation you were referring to?" The 3 officers exchanged glances. General Morrison cleared his throat. "We were discussing a hypothetical scenario, Captain. Part of our briefing to Ms. Vasquez involved explaining how weapons trafficking operations work so she could better identify suspicious documents in her translation work." "Hypothetical scenario where you used your real names and ranks?" Rodriguez asked skeptically. Colonel Harrison stepped forward. "Captain, we've been fighting weapons trafficking for years. Sometimes our briefings involve detailed scenarios that help civilian personnel understand the methods used by criminals." Rodriguez was clearly not convinced by their explanations, but Maria could see that he needed more evidence to move forward with arrests. The video was compelling, but it could potentially be explained away as a training exercise gone wrong. "I need to examine the original documents that started this investigation," Rodriguez said. "Ms. Vasquez, where are these Russian documents you mentioned?" "They're in my office," Maria replied, "along with the copies I made. Everything is locked in my desk drawer." Rodriguez assigned one of his personnel to escort Maria to retrieve the documents, while he continued questioning the 3 officers. As they walked through the corridors of the building, Maria noticed that security had been significantly increased. There were guards at every checkpoint, and she could see military police vehicles outside the building. When they reached her office, Maria quickly gathered all the documents she had been working on. As she looked through them again, she realized that there were even more discrepancies than she had initially discovered. The pattern of weapons being transferred to unauthorized locations was extensive and had been going on for at least 2 years. "This is much bigger than I thought," she told the military police officer who was with her. "They've been stealing weapons systematically and covering it up through falsified paperwork." When they returned to Conference Room 7, Captain Rodriguez was examining other materials that his team had gathered. He looked up as Maria entered with the documents. "Ms. Vasquez, I've had my team run preliminary background checks on the allegations you've made," he said. "We've found some irregularities in weapons inventory that support your claims. We're going to need to conduct a full investigation." Maria felt a wave of relief. Finally, someone in authority was taking her seriously and looking into the evidence objectively. But her relief was short-lived. As Captain Rodriguez began formally reading the three officers their rights, Colonel Harrison made one final desperate move. He lunged toward Maria, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the door. "If I'm going down, she's coming with me," he snarled, his military discipline completely shattered. But Harrison had underestimated Sergeant Williams, who immediately moved to intercept him. The young sergeant tackled Harrison, and in the ensuing struggle, all three men crashed into the concrete wall of the conference room. The impact was violent and sudden. Harrison's head struck the wall with a sickening thud, and he collapsed unconscious. General Morrison tried to help his colleague but was immediately restrained by the other military police personnel. As medical personnel were called to treat Harrison's injuries, Maria realized that her ordeal was finally over. The investigation would continue. The weapons trafficking operation would be exposed, and the three officers would face justice for their crimes. But the cost had been enormous. Harrison's head injury was severe, and it was unclear whether he would survive. The weapons they had sold were already in the hands of criminals and terrorists around the world. And Maria knew that she would never feel completely safe again, knowing how close she had come to being murdered by people she had trusted. Captain Rodriguez assured her that she would be placed in protective custody until the full scope of the operation could be determined and all conspirators identified. As she was escorted from the building, Maria looked back at Fort Meridian and wondered how many other secrets were hidden within its walls. An investigation that followed would expose a network of corruption that reached far beyond the three officers she had encountered. Her discovery of those seemingly routine discrepancies in Russian documents had unraveled one of the largest weapons trafficking operations in military history. But for Maria, the most important outcome was simpler. She had survived, she had done the right thing, and she had prevented countless more weapons from reaching the hands of America's enemies. Sometimes, she reflected, the most dangerous enemy is the one you trust completely.